Could these revisions be made enough that Ukraine, in fact, accepts this peace plan?
Well, there's a lot of noise and confusion about all of this, but I mean, I think Ukraine, there are several red lines. It's not going to give up territory to Russia that Russia doesn't control. And that's why, you know, when you read the draft of the treaty, some of it was clearly drafted in Moscow. We can argue about how much was. And then that it will never be able to join NATO. That's really up to NATO, as the Europeans have pointed out, not to Russia or really to the United States. It has to reduce the size of its armed forces, which are about 900,000 now, to 600,000. And I'm sure there's some bargaining room there. And the European plan, the counter plan to the US-Russian one, says that this is something that can be discussed. Know that there would be amnesty for everyone in this war. Again, from the Ukrainian point of view, the devastation that Russia has caused, the loss of life, the terror, the assassinations. Putin anyway has been declared a war criminal by the International Criminal Court. So there are a number of red lines, I think, here for Ukraine. But clearly, this is a bargaining process that's going on. It's obviously not going to be completed by Thanksgiving. And the question, one of the questions for me is Russia going to drag this out now and say it's interested in a serious negotiation so that it can continue to make some advances along the battle lines in the hope that next year Ukraine will be in a weaker position than it is now?
Well, that would be right out of the Putin playbook. What do you think, Angela, about the individuals who have brought us to this point? We, of course, know Steve Witkoff has been deeply involved. Apparently, Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, as well. But then to see the Secretary of State come in with changes in Geneva, are they all on the same page or not?
Well, clearly this was drafted by Kirill Dmitriev, who's the head of the Sovereign Wealth Fund in Russia, and Stephen Witkoff. Dmitriev came to the United States. We made an exemption to grant him a visa, even though he's actually not supposed to get one. And he met in Miami with Mr. Witkoff, apparently with Jared Kushner, and they drafted this. But, you know, as far as we can see, Secretary Rubio was not involved in that drafting. And there was this curious thing over the weekend where he had a call with a bipartisan group of senators at the Halifax International Security Forum in Canada, saying that he hadn't seen this before, that this came from Russia and this wasn't an American plan. Then he reversed himself a couple of hours later and said it was an American plan. He was there yesterday in Geneva. But I think the impression one gets is of lack of coordination within the administration about this agreement and who really wrote it.
Not so much on the same page. Angela Stent, I saw you in the New York Times yesterday. Experts, 7 experts on how to actually end the war in Ukraine, and you brought your prescription, which is fascinating to read here. Sanctions are not enough, you say. Ukraine needs to be able to purchase more weapons to convince Putin he will not win on the battlefield. And you go along to say, even if the Europeans were able to provide a stabilization force, without U.S. backup, that force would be constrained in what it can do. So what is the credible security guarantee in your eyes?
So a credible security guarantee would be, if the U.S. is serious about it, an Article 5 type guarantee. But that, of course, begs the question, well, if you're going to give it the same guarantee that you give NATO, why not admit Ukraine to NATO? But obviously that's off the cards at the moment. But it would have to be credible. And the way we don't know how this is being formulated from the U.S. side in this current peace agreement. But, you know, previous guarantees didn't work. We all signed a memorandum in 1994 when Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons to come to its assistance if it were again invaded, and nobody did. So I think you really have to have a guarantee where you can really believe that the U.S. would back up its European allies, and if Russia were to reinvade, would use military force to get Russia to go back into Russia and leave Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. What do you make of the language from the Secretary of State that now this must be seen, the revisions must be seen and reviewed by Moscow? I think the line was that, of course, Russia gets a vote. Why are we so careful in dealing with the invading country in this case?
Because we have a president who really wants to improve ties to Russia, wants to reset relations with Russia, wants this war to end. He believes it wouldn't have started had he been president in 2022, and wants to get on with business deals with Russia, with maybe another nuclear arms control agreement with Russia. And this is, I think, why we're taking Russia into account. But we're treating the aggressor somehow better than we're treating the victim.
You've got the Army Secretary in Kyiv. Why is Dan Driscoll part of this, but the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, is nowhere to be found?
Well, here we get into maybe the internal politics of what's happening in this administration. Apparently, General Driscoll is quite close to the Vice President, J.D. Vance, who is advancing his potential candidacy, maybe to be the next Secretary of War. That's one explanation for it.
Okay, interesting. So what are the odds that President Trump and Vladimir Putin get together with Viktor Orban in Hungary for a summit? If they hammer out a peace plan here that Moscow feels is acceptable, is that the next step?
I think that would have been one of them. I think what we now have to see is, as the Secretary of State said, this is a living document. They're still making revisions to it. If they believe that this is the best offer they can make, and if the Russians are willing to sign on, because the Russians will have to make some compromises too, which has to do with the use of their frozen assets, then I think we could see a summit in Budapest. I wouldn't want to give a timetable to it, but that's a possibility.
Wow. We could see, I guess, President Zelenskyy here in Washington first. The reporting is he could make a visit as soon as this week if this comes together. Is that a smart move for him now, Angela? It seems to be, 1 out of 4 visits go pretty well for him at the White House. He found himself on the other side of the cabinet room table last time he was here, with reporters crowding behind him, and didn't exactly get the treatment that Viktor Orban got. Why come to Washington?
Because, I mean, Ukraine really doesn't want to lose what is left of U.S. support, and we're not really giving them financial support anymore, but we're still allowing Europeans to buy weapons from us that they then give to Ukraine. It's called the Pearl program. He wants that, and he doesn't. I don't think he wants to antagonize President Trump any further. But, the last time we were here, he was there. As you said, he was asked tough questions. But on the other hand, you can see the photos of the two leaders, the two presidents, smiling. And then we have this complete reversal from President Trump tweeting out yesterday that Ukraine was ungrateful, using really the same words that he used during that disastrous Oval Office meeting in February. So if Zelenskyy did come here, it would be really to reinforce the fact that Ukraine is willing to sign a peace deal, to have an immediate ceasefire along the current lines of contact, in other words, not ceding territory to Russia that Russia doesn't control. And that's why he would come here. But I'm not sure that it would be that advisable at the moment. I'm sure that he would wait and see how this now plays out with the meeting yesterday between the United States, Ukraine, and then there were some Europeans there. And then there's also a European plan, which Secretary Rubio says that he hasn't read yet, but maybe taking some of that into account too.
Yeah, it does seem interesting how we always get back to square one on the rhetoric here. It looks like the gears are turning once again on Russia sanctions on Capitol Hill, Angela Stent. In our remaining moment or so, I wonder if you see that hastening the acceptance of a peace plan. Is that motivating Donald Trump or Vladimir Putin?
So I'm afraid you just cut out. I didn't hear your question.
The prospect of sanctions in our remaining moment, will that hasten a peace deal?
Yeah. I mean, that's the intention of it, certainly to put more pressure on the Russians. There is that, Senate bill that could be signed any moment, and President Trump could sign it too. That's to get the Russians to seriously sit at the table. I don't know how effective that will be, but that's certainly the intent of it.